Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the next episode of CAEsports Overwatch.
The Toronto Defiant will not be denied.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Made in Esports. One of your hosts, Spencer, with me is Chris. We have a very interesting episode for you guys today because, as you guys know, the new Overwatch days, the June Joust, I believe it's called, is starting.
June Joust.
And thank you for that. And so we thought it would be fun to maybe give some 5 teams to watch going into the June Joust. These are some of the 5 teams with, I think, have some of the best storylines to talk about. There was a bunch of other teams we could have picked, but these are sort of the 5 that stood out to me. So with that out of the way,
set the reminder though. Set a reminder to watch these teams. I feel like they're gonna have some really great storylines going into this. And before we get started, hey, please, if you like our content, please give us a like. Please give Main Esports a follow. I count every single like we get every day and chart that on our weekly performance meetings.
yeah, it's how I value myself as a human being. So with that out of the way, let's just jump right into it. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah. Okay, so the number 1 team I think that's going to be on everybody's mind and everybody should watch out for is the Dallas Fuel. I don't think this is incredibly surprising. They won the entire May tournament. Exactly, right? But they were a team that started 2-2, right? I believe they dropped their first 2 matches to Houston and oh my god, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anyways, they lost 2 matches in the stage. But then they go on this magical run where they 3-0'd both the Shock and the Houston Outlaws and then went on to win the entire stage, which myself and I think a lot of other people were not predicting, especially going into the May tournament here. So the biggest question for me is, was that a flash in the pan for the Dallas Fuel? Or are they truly this meta-defining team that it doesn't matter whether Tracer's in play, it doesn't matter if McCree's meta, it doesn't matter if Ash is meta. Dallas Fuel is going to be able to find a way to use their teamwork to pocket around. They have one of the best main tanks, if not the best main tank in the league, Fearless, and they're going to be able to devise a strategy that they can win championships with. And I'm very curious to see if their magic is going to continue, because if they're able to once again perform to the level at which they were in the May tournament, because I do think that characters such as Ash and McCree are going to be meta, I'm officially sold. Right? Like I still think I still think there's a possibility that maybe they come back down to earth, but if they're able to do it again, they're onto something special, and I'll never count this team out again.
Yeah, I think for this one, what makes this storyline really interesting is that with their original, before Pine came on, with their original, I guess, lack of flexibility and what we would think would be heroes, we would think that they kind of be a one meta team. They have one comp, they can't run anything else. So, although I think we are seeing a little bit more flexibility from them, I feel like we are in a little bit of a gray area, a risky area where they could turn out to not have as much depth in the heroes that they can use as possible. I mean, for example, I know Sparkle has a deep-ish hero pool, but he played Tracer 60% of the time last stage, and that's now banned, so he's gonna have to go out and try to make other things work. Great thing though, still Fearless can still play Monkey though. That's the best and most exciting Monkey play I see. I literally try and learn from it, and
and that's a good point. I do wonder if some of the ways they're able to get around not having the hit scan, i.e. not having the McCree, was obviously using the Tracer to try to pepper them and work around some strategies with that, and that's no longer an option. The question is, with Sombra out of the meta, will you be able to start to see the rise of like a Doomfist, for instance? Will Genji become a little bit more viable? If like Doomfist, for instance, becomes more in the meta, then this team can absolutely pound again. And if any team's going to try to make it work, like an Echo Doomfist Monkey dive, it's a Dallas Field. I'm very excited to see him pull it off.
Are they going to go full dive then? Or are they going to get D.Va involved as well?
It's possible, right? They can run the Ana. So anyways,
2019 dive?
Yeah, I'm very excited to see what they're capable of. And obviously, they're also at the top of the reason because there's a good chance that as we get later on the stage and potentially going into the tournament, you might actually see Big Boss Pine return. So if it is like an Ash Echo,
Pine.
Yeah, if it is an Echo meta, it might not matter or Ash Echo meta, sorry, they might be able to actually bring in an Ash player. And that's why they're on the top of my list. Another team to talk about that I think is really important to highlight is the Houston Outlaws. And this was sort of the belle of the ball, going into the stage 1, because they were the Scrimbucks savior, right? There was everybody who trashed on Scrumbucks at the start of the year. The Houston Outlaws were the saving grace because they came out here and absolutely pounded. They beat the San Francisco Shock. They go undefeated. People were calling them the best team in the league. They look fantastic. And then they go get 3-0 by the Dallas Fuel, and while that's a little bit concerning, Dallas Fuel went on to win the entire thing, so for all we know, they could have been, the second or third best team in the league. One, is that going to continue? Is this a legitimate top caliber team, or will teams start to figure out their teamwork and maybe catch up to them, and will they come back down to earth? As well as two, they've recently just signed Dreamer, which is another main tank, which is very interesting because while I'm happy to see Dreamer back into the league, he's obviously a member of the Valiant being saved, which I'm a huge fan of. I hope every single person on that team can get back into the league at some point. If this truly was a top tier team and they're performing fantastically in scrims and everything's going perfect, why would you go out there and sign a main tank at this point? So what this potentially alludes to, in my opinion, is maybe the scrims haven't been going as well. Maybe now that they can't run the Ryan Rush compositions and other teams have gotten better at running double bubble, maybe Jongwoo's monkey isn't up to snuff to the level of which we thought it was. I'm not entirely sure, but when I see the addition of Dreamer, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. So I'm very curious to see how Houston performs in this stage, especially since they have some losable games, in my opinion. They play Atlanta, Florida, and Toronto. And all three of those games, they could easily win. They could easily win. But they're all three are like sneaky loss potentials, right? Atlanta could maybe upset them if Houston's...
Could they? They're like known as a rush one.
I agree. But they're also a really, really good double shield team. And if you are able to run Orisa and Orisa becomes a little bit more meta, I could see Gators Orisa being a little bit tough to deal with. Florida's a very good double bubble team, and Toronto should also be a very good double bubble team. So there's a potential that they actually go 1. I think they're going to beat London regardless, but there's a potential they end up going 1-3. There's also potential they go 4-0. So I don't know, and that's why they're a team to watch for me.
Yeah, you know what? You kind of said what I was going to say. I was just going to say they were a little bit more of a, in my opinion, a rush team, and clearly that's not a thing anymore. You can also debate, I don't know if poke is going to be big in this coming stage, because there are a lot of poke heroes, but everybody loves to play Tracer, and that's kind of out. So they really have to do a little bit of switching around to figure out what their priorities are.
Yeah, the issue with poke is Zen's banned, and Baptiste has been recently nerfed. But again, will it become like a hog meta, right? Like if you watch Plat Chat, they were kind of theorizing it could be another hog main tank to maybe try to counter the double bubble. And if you have a hog main tank, we obviously saw the Houston tank line have success in that in contenders, so that could also help them. So regardless, and I bring up the hog main tank because it also leads me to the next team that I'm very excited to talk about, and that's the SEOUL Dynasty. This was a team that maybe didn't have an underwhelming stage. They went 3-1. They looked good, but I don't know if they looked to the level of which some people were hoping, and they didn't look to the level of when they shocked everybody coming in second place at the end of that previous tournament in the previous season. So in my opinion, with Reinhardt being out, this now allows Gesture to play the monkey compositions and potentially, again, that hog main tank style of play. And if that is the case, I think the SEOUL Dynasty can return to being that championship caliber team that a lot of different people thought they might be.
Yeah, I understand that. And I'm really actually curious too, because they weren't too bad with the ball, Marvel playing ball. So I wonder if that's going to be a viable composition, especially with the Sombra out too. I know that, wasn't really a big thing, but I feel like we could see a little bit more ball meta, and I personally don't want to see that because I hate watching ball. But we all know that APAC is a little bit more skewed towards being proficient in dive and double
mobility
bubble
comps.
Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Mobility comps, they always have. So I feel like this is kind of going to buff APAC in general. But I specifically think it's going to be good for them too.
I agree, and I don't know if I just don't know which composition you would run around the ball, especially because you don't have the Tracer to follow up. That's one of the bigger concerns. The fact that I feel like to really truly enable ball, you need a hero to really follow up and get those picks, and that's why like ball and Tracer work so well off of one another. So I do agree that the Sombra being one of the major counters is out does benefit it, but I think Tracer, like if it was like McCree instead of Tracer, I would totally agree with you. But because it's Tracer and also Zen, so you don't have the Discord orb, I'm not sure. So we'll see. I don't want to spend too much time speculating on the meta because it could be so many different things. Yeah, but I do think that there is a potential that the SEOUL Dynasty, if I bring up their schedule really quickly here, regardless of what it is, could potentially be one of those teams that ends up going all the way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just more focusing towards the APAC, and we also wanted to touch on NYSL.
NYXL.
I'm thinking about COD right now.
I know,
Why am I doing that? And man, NYSL, I mean, I'm sure everybody can agree, was an interesting team because they were just so highly regarded before the season started.
Because of Scrimbucks, yeah.
And because of Scrimbucks, and also like let's be like kind of clear, at least us two from our perspective, we're pretty high in the roster. With Ivy Jonak, we always liked Yakpong, like Feather coming on. We thought that they would be pretty really good. Bianca.
The one question mark was Friday, but you're right. Those 5 I was actually pretty high on.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of like the core right there.
Yeah.
And I feel like they haven't been able to jam yet. But this, just like I kind of mentioned the APAC, I think that this specific team was a team that was performing a little bit better in the dive meta too. So I feel like they're going to definitely be buffed.
Yeah, Monkey Yakpung is something special. Like that's by far his best hero, and if he's going to make it work, it would be in a double bubble composition or Monkey Tracer, whatever you want to call it. I totally agree. They were probably the most underwhelming team. Like especially if you're a Scrimbox, people were putting them second, people were putting them third. This was a team that was very, very highly rated, and they came in here and really disappointed. I do think the fact that Rush is becoming obviously Reinhardt's band, that should help them out.
So I think we're going to see them running a little bit of, almost diva dive.
Yeah, Bianca's got a really good diva. Dive. I agree. This is a team that I think could potentially get hot. They play the Charge and they play the Valiant, so there's a very good chance that they at least get 2 wins. They also play Fusion and Seoul, so they might go 2-2. But with 2-2, it might put them into that knockout stage, and again, they get hot. They can maybe make some noise. I don't know if they're going to make some noise to the same level which Seoul might make some noise. I still think they're below Seoul, Philadelphia, and Shanghai. But if they can kind of start to establish themselves as that 4th or 5th team and have some pretty competitive matches, I think that would do a lot to the NYXL fans to sort of, retune some expectations.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last thing we wanted to touch on is obviously, as you guys probably are guessing, San Francisco Shock.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting one because I think that, from my perspective, this is a test of the coaching staff as well as a test of our expectations. I think that obviously everybody can agree they underperformed a little bit in the first stage in May Melee. And I think that right now the sentiment probably is that, hey, they didn't perform too well. Maybe that was a fluke. They still have amazing talent. They still have amazing coaching. What's going on? But if they don't perform up to their top tier standards in the June Joust as well, I feel like people are going to start to adjust their expectations and see them more as a upper mid table team versus the top team that they were for the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think that the in terms of test of the coaching, I think everybody knows Krusty's the GOAT, right? Like that's not really in contention here. I do think that it would be a little bit concerning because he did lose so many other pieces that he had alongside him, and all of a sudden they start to struggle. Potentially that could be a narrative, but I still think that, regardless of how they perform, Krusty's stocks are still going to be at an all-time high, as they should be. He's a back-to-back world champion. For me, I think the biggest thing is what you touched on earlier, and it's that readjustment of expectations. This was my number 1 team in the entire league going into the year. And to be honest, I probably would have to put Dallas Field number 1 now, but at the same time, would be very tempted to put Shock number 1. I would still have them number 2 in NA regardless of how they performed. Yeah. And we say that they had an underwhelming performance. They still went 3-1. But I do agree that I very much expected them, 1, not to lose to Houston, but also 2, to get to the knockouts and make it to Hawaii, and they didn't. So in that regard, I do think it's underwhelming, whereas we haven't seen as much Glister as I thought we were going to. I was actually extremely high on him going into the year. The Shock, I think, do tend to do this where they start out a little bit slowly, right? We saw this in Stage 2 or Season 2. We saw it in Season 3, and then they start to build, and they really come together at the end. So I'm not worried, but I do think the narrative of can Shock return to this dominant form that we have previously seen them in is something to take into account.
Yeah, I understand that. And just another thought too, when I talk about kind of like a test of coaching staff, obviously no one can deny that Krusty is not a god, but I feel like, a real test and definition of coaching staff is being able to get teams out of adversity, working through adversity.
Yeah.
And they face a little bit of adversity right now. Another thing that I'm just thinking I'm curious about, and there's no way to tell if this is something or not, but man, they have so many talented people on their team. I wonder if there's a little bit of internal strife, just like between the players who are benched, not benched. Like we have Striker, Nero, Teo, and Glister, literally all gods. 2 of them are on the bench.
I don't think so, because this is the same Shock that's done this season after season. They've always had a ton of talent. They've always had an extremely deep roster, an extremely deep bench, and they've always managed to figure it out. For me, the only thing that I would maybe question is like it's just a little bit of the motivation. Like if you've won, we see this all the time in multitude of different esports or regular sports, right? If you've won 2 seasons in a row, these players, like, they don't need to prove themselves, right? They don't need to win the June Joust or the May Melee to be noteworthy, right? Like, I don't know if that motivates them as much as like the grand finals will. So I do think that there are certain teams in certain esports that maybe start off a little bit slower. They're kind of have that swagger that we know we can turn it on, we know we can do it, and when it matters the most, we will figure it out. And I think that maybe could be a thing. So I wouldn't be surprised actually if San Francisco do continue to struggle and then just at the end of the year just absolutely turn up and once again become the San Francisco Shock that we know they can be. But I'm very curious to see if they're able to do that beforehand, because like how long do we think we're going to see like Violet McCree, for instance, until Krusty's finally like, okay, no, like Glister's a McCree player, Violet's not a McCree player, he's a support, right? Like I feel like there's only so many times that we're going to see him experiment until eventually he's like, these are the 6, this is what we're locking down, here's what we're going to do. So
all right, yeah,
we'll see. I think they should again be the team to come out and win. They'll still be my prediction. If you say who's going to win this stage, I'm still going to say the Shock, because until they prove me otherwise, I still have them in my heart of hearts as the best team in NA.
Yeah, you know what? I got to say that too. I totally agree with that. And hey, look at Spencer, if you don't have anything else to touch on, please guys, let us know what your thoughts are, on who to look out for in the comments below. I really, really want to hear if you guys have any other additions. I feel like Florida maybe one. Comment Florida. And if you like our content, please like and subscribe.
Florida's an interesting team. Toronto, right? Can they bounce back? And LA Gladiators, Atlanta Reign. There's a lot of good teams we could have picked. I just thought those 5s were some interesting ones. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and enjoy.